It's Party Truth with me on JJ Tabane. Of course, our Freedom Day show or episode tonight following the 27th of April, which was 30 years until that glorious moment where everybody queued to exercise the democratic right, to take the power to each and every one of us as we went to that ballot. We have so much to celebrate. The story of the 30 years of democracy is a story of the good, the bad, but also the ugly. It's what you can easily call a tale of two cities. And I think tonight we need to reflect on that. So my guest tonight, the Minister of Justice, Ronald Lamola, he was 10 years old in 1994, he told us on Saturday. And then he reflects now. I'm sure he's a Tinzwalo. If you are 40, I'm sure you're still a Tinzwalo. Yeah, he'll tell us about that. And then, of course, Professor Seth Cooper, who is the chairperson of the Robben Island Museum, but also an activist in his own right. He's the type of remaining people who brush shoulders with the likes of Stephen Biko in those days. Truly wisdom there personified. So he'll be talking to us. Together they'll be telling me about what their reflections are on the 30 years of democracy. We'll talk about other issues of national interest. But I thought, let's reflect quickly. There's a lot of contestation, if you like, about the 30 years. The reality is it's a mixed bag. So anybody with both extremes, the one who says all is honky-dory, everybody's a Tinzwalo, that's wrong. The same way, the ones who are saying nothing has happened, things are better than before apartheid, that's also wrong. The truth lies somewhere here in the middle. Let's start with the era under Mandela. If we were to look at our categorize our eras according to the leadership. During the Mandela era, it was a bout of euphoria. Issues of reconciliation topped the agenda. A lot of issues that are controversial, such as land and property, took a back seat. And we are looking at structuring the constitution, which was eventually adopted in 1996. It is something of a feat, especially that a lot of people have written this country off as a candidate for a bloodbath, saying that people are killing each other. I was in the UK in 1993, and I was people that say, "Hey, your country is it's a bloodbath. People are killing each other with asseghais." I said, "No, man, it's a small piece of a country. The country has 9 provinces, and then people are busy killing each other in something called KwaZulu-Natal. It won't affect the elections." They didn't believe me, of course. But of course, as an eternal optimist, I also in my heart was hoping it doesn't affect the elections at that point. So that era of Mandela represented that euphoria, that reawakening, that embracing of a new era. And so you could say that's the good part of our democracy. I mean, there were small things here and there. Mandela called black journalists and told them not to write under the instruction of whites. Just a bizarre thing. I mean, you just thought, no, don't worry. It's not like that at all. And then, of course, there was the arms deal that happened under that era. But other than that, a wonderful presidency, and he did something that doesn't happen often in the continent, which is to quit after one term. People were surprised. Hey, man, are you sure you want to? Yeah, no. I'm done 5 years. Let Thabo Mbeki take over. And of course, then the Thabo Mbeki era also, where the big agenda here was transformation. This is where we saw the birth of BEE. I think they should have gone much further, especially because there was a recommendation, a clear recommendation in black and white from the TRC, saying white companies, particularly the ones that have dominated the South, must pay a wealth tax. No, let them do it voluntarily. Look at what it has gotten us now. The white companies couldn't give a hoot about your transformation because they were given too much of a free hand to do as they pleased in terms of reparation. People are still waiting for justice after the TRC. Right? Of course, Mbeki also put the African agenda on the map. Kudos to him for forming the likes of NEPAD, the likes of the African peer review mechanism. Truly a big legacy in that regard. But of course, the big stench was the whole issue of the AIDS denialism. That's the big stench. Some 300,000 people dying on our watch because we were dilly-dallying instead of confronting the HIV/AIDS monster head on. But other than that, what a fantastic presidency there, economy growing, fantastic run in the economy. We have never seen such growth of 5% in years. And of course, thank you to Mbeki's successor, Jacob Zuma, who plunged the economic growth to zero. Literally, because we wasn't joke around, 0.1, it's just zero. The economy wasn't growing for zero. Even as we speak now, even after they revise the target, it will still be 0 point something. That's the pure evidence you need for whether those years were wasted. We don't need to have any complicated statistic. You only have to look at unemployment rate that we have. You only have to look at the hunger rate, people living under the bread line, to realize that the gains made in the first 15 years of democracy were reversed. Of course, we must give credit to Jacob Zuma on his last day in office. After being in office for 9 years, in his last day, at least he left us with free education. I think that one we must agree, because the ANC had taken the resolution as far back as 2007 to say there must be free education. It took Zuma watching his term of office ending to say, I'm signing now, there must be free education now. Let's park the issue about the NSFAS and the corruption and the fact that they just made a mess of the whole thing. They must just give the students directly that money and just transfer straight to the universities. We have already seen, we don't need any more proof that NSFAS is a mess. And then come CR17, big dreams, big hope. Tumamina, please send me. And the question we must ask is, Utumekile na? Ramaphosa. And you will answer that question on the 29th of May. A lot of investment pledges, we must give that to him. Very, very good. And I think that is something that is a seed that we need to plant, because you can forget, you can have all dreams you want. As long as you don't have foreign direct investment, you've got to be joking about growing the economy. So as we assess our 30 years, we should be saying, how do we make the 30 years count? And of course, the big stench in this particular administration is the fact that we've got a thick 5-volume report of the state capture listing all sorts of crooks who to this day, not one of them is in chains, not one of them is in orange overalls. And there's always a justification. 5 years ago, we appointed the National Director of Public Projects, and it was a big song and dance. This guy, things are going to be better, crooks are going to go to jail. I'm still waiting for just one solitary crook, one. And I'm not talking about a small fish here, I'm talking about big fish. You must give me a big fish, and then I'll believe you. If I see a big fish in prison, then I'll believe that the NPA has sort of broken the shackles of its capture. But unfortunately, right now, we have a lawless country because people think, if these politicians can get away with it, why can't I get away with it? It's not the habit that falls from the sky. It's monkey do, monkey, what is it? Monkey say, monkey do, you know the phrase. That's what is happening in this country. So stuff that are spoiling the big celebration we should be having, that says 98% of this country has access to water, electricity, 3 to 4 million houses were built for people who would never afford it. Those are issues we must celebrate. But equally, we must be able to say to our leaders, you can do better. Because your standard is not the apartheid government. Your standard is a morally high standard for which so many people have died, for which so many people have sacrificed. So, happy birthday, South Africa. You've got an opportunity on the 29th of May to celebrate that birthday appropriately. And for that, I wish you luck. Minister, welcome. Thank you for always being available.
Thank you.
As you were saying, it's your last interview before you are out of office. No, because you have to be out of office, even if you are re-elected and be reappointed.
Before elections, I'm going to come back after.
No, there's no time. It's 30 days left. And we've got 50 parties to interview, do you think there's a contested narrative about how we should look at the last 8 years? Because, surely we can't argue that all was honky-dory or all was so bad. But do you think there's a contested narration where people want to lean more to the one side rather than the other?
Yes, there is. And it's natural. Any democracy is contested. Even in some of the most advanced democracies, third world countries, it's still contested.
Yeah.
In the USA, in some of the well-developed countries. And ourselves, we have been very balanced with the 30 years to acknowledge that there have been challenges, but also state the reality that there has also been successes. And I think you have mentioned some of them with regards to access to water, connecting electricity across the country, the NFSAS, which is the biggest breaker of any generational poverty in any nation. And this is one of the leading nations in the world which has got such examples. And I mean, listening to former President Mandela and what happened, who will not be inspired? Even ourselves, when we're still young, those are the people that inspired us. So we need to be able to state that with the leadership of today, when the president and others looking at the young people, they must still be inspired. And I believe many Tintswalos out there are still inspired. Indeed, we have to now chat a positive way forward. And that is what we had a conference about ourselves on human rights, on the Constitution. And the outcome was very clear, that we need to create an inclusive and an equal society.
But do you think there's enough acknowledgement of things that are going wrong? Because even those of us who are pointing out things that are wrong, it's out of the pain of seeing some of the gains being reversed. I mean, we just talk now about electricity. Yes, you have electrified the whole country, but we are sitting in a situation where for 15 years, there's been load shedding. I mean, it's actually unbelievable that you could have such a lengthy period of a dysfunctional power system. Because that's where it is. If our power, is at about 50%, instead of being 80%, it shows a dysfunction. Same with water, right? You have to only talk about the situation in Hammanskraal where people have died of cholera. I've not heard that even your government saying they're going to compensate them, by the way, for dying out of pure neglect of all the spheres of government. So I don't want to make too many examples, but just for you to answer me on this, do you think there's enough acknowledgement of stuff that has gone wrong? And that's why maybe this narrative seems to be distorted, because it seems like the president at the State of the Nation want to feed us at Inswalo and not talk about it in Nico. Who's suffering, who's drowning in a toilet, whose NSFAS money is stolen, etc.
You know, JJ, I sometimes say to the president, I think you are being too acknowledging of this mistake.
You think so?
Because, I mean, in many of his speeches, he acknowledges where there have been problems. Even when we were campaigning in 2019, he acknowledged that there were problems. Even now, he still say, we have done this.
But do little about the problems.
There are challenges, even in the speech on the 27th, 30 years Freedom Day celebrations. He acknowledges where there are challenges. The electricity one he did, and said that there's now an improvement. There's a turning around of the situation. The water one, he also acknowledged there's now an improvement, turning around of the situation. You can see movement in Guyana and in many parts of the country. Indeed, also with issues of unemployment. But you will remember that we've just come out of a huge, difficult challenge of COVID-19 that had battered the economy. State SA says that we have now gone back to the pre-COVID-19.
Turn the corner.
Yes, we are beginning to turn the corner.
All right, let me bring Prof here.
We must work on.
I expect you to say all the nice things. Prof, please help me here. Do you think... First of all, that the narrative overall across society is balanced? In other words, people acknowledge that we are in a free country. I mean, it's something that you and I can take for granted now that we are here in Hyde Park at 8 p.m. We could be arrested. In 1989, we'd be arrested to be here this time of the night, right? You have free expression. There's all sorts of freedoms that have come with democracy. But we didn't fight just so that we can have the freedoms. We fought so that people can literally enjoy those benefits or dividends of freedom. Prof, your view?
No, I tend to agree with some of the statements you have made. I want to also point out that today is the anniversary of your namesake, JJ, Onvutse Abraham Ramotibe Tiro, being expelled from the University of the North. So recognizing those who went before us is very important. I think we in the last few years have lost our sense of coherence because of our freedom to say what we want to without let. The result is, and COVID has exacerbated this, where we've turned inwards, we've started looking at ourselves, our social media, and we've tended to ignore the fact, and you've already pointed out, we actually have those freedoms, but you cannot say to the person out there who lives on the periphery, literally, that live on these freedoms, because you have to put something in the stomach, you have to have clean water, and so on. I think we don't have an understanding of the issues we confront. There hasn't been a serious compact between the leadership and the mass of our people on what the timetable for some of these changes are going to be like. And there are good stories. We cannot harp on the negatives, and I think that it's very important. This minister, for instance, I recall Nasrec 1, him raising, I'm a young person, why shouldn't I be in leadership? And I'm very pleased that he actually has opened up. For instance, the TRC prosecutions, I know of a couple at least that are underway. I hope that the media covers those things. I hope that people get rest from the horrors of the past. Having said that, some of the wheels move very, very slowly, and then you don't get an explanation. I think there ought to be better communication, better explanation to people, because people will listen if they're spoken to. However, things seem to happen up there and not at the bottom levels, and therefore we have a cacophony. I can't imagine us having a papyrus scroll of a few meters long with 50-something parties to vote for on the 29th. We ought to actually have an electronic system, but be that as it may, we are where we are. And yes, there are multiple things, especially corruption, especially self-aggrandizement, and so on. But the hope is that there will be an opportunity to have fresher voices, newer people in government, especially the majority who are under 30 years of age. Over 60% of our people out there are under that age. The majority of them are out of this system. Just as we were out of the apartheid system, here we're finding more young people are not in that system. And I would urge everyone who has the opportunity to cast their vote, to make sure that we don't moan and groan. And young people especially should make themselves available for office and not allow a graveyard shift to continue. My generation, which is the president's generation, should not continue to maintain the hegemony of power, and younger people, newer voices, need to be heard. So I believe that this democracy allows that. Without this democracy, we wouldn't even be speaking.
Yeah. But Prof, tell me, do you believe that there is too much negativity to a point where we are unable to recognize the gains that have been made? Because, people who are comparing the apartheid system with now could only be people who have not experienced the apartheid system. That system was vicious, was murderous, was all of that, right? Do you think that in the conversations that are happening now, or maybe it is, in a sense, maybe blinded by the elections that are coming? Because maybe if it was not an election year and we are just dealing with 30 years of democracy, there would be a lot more positivity about what we have achieved. Do you think there is a little bit of that in the mix?
Not a little, JJ, a lot. In fact, there are self-proclaimed people out there, and you wonder who actually funds all these parties. There are proxies, and that's one of the things that we haven't looked at in our democracy, because the rich people, the people who, and you said foreign direct investment, you know, if we just ignore foreign direct investment, if we look at our banks, the accumulated cash in their hands that is not being made available. If you look at the extractive economies, the kinds of companies that mine and continue to pull out wealth from our soil and from our environment, but they are listed elsewhere. That happened during democracy. This was not allowed during apartheid, and yet we get people who have no understanding of what apartheid meant. They'll just shout Mandela, but they won't understand what he went through. We won't understand the murderous past that we've come from. If we have that balance in our heads, we will be thankful we have reached this stage. Ignore some of the terrible things. Let's go beyond our own personal needs. Let's look at something, and you mentioned some of those examples. NSFAS, direct EFTs from National Treasury to the universities. There are so many things like that that can happen where you unlock potential. And let's call the banks out. Let's call the extractive economies, extractive companies out that dominate not only our Johannesburg Stock Exchange, but lead the world in diamonds, in minerals, in rare minerals, etc. The last I checked very recently, we're still the richest country on the continent, and we are not benefiting from it. This country is rich beyond anybody's means, but yet we have this huge poverty gap. It's about time we change that and we work towards ensuring we have a difference out there.
After the break, I want to zone in on the issues of the economy, right? About whether or not we are exploiting the full potential of South Africa, where economic freedom is concerned. Yes, 30 years, we can vote and so on. But what about the second generation rights, right? Are we doing enough, to make sure that our people can benefit from that dividend of freedom? We are reflecting on the 30 years of democracy tonight with Professor Seth Cooper as well as Minister Ronald Lamola. Stay tuned for more conversation after the break. It's Part to Truth. We are here every Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday at 8 p.m. Speaking truth to power and conducting conversations that build. Of course, we are reflecting on the 30 years of democracy this month, and a lot of people coming through. So tonight, this fantastic guest helping me to understand. Let's talk about the economic. I'll just give an example, for example, about BEE. We no longer even hear of it being spoken, to be honest. If it's tokenistically here and there. When the codes were introduced, in about 2007, the private sector was running to comply. They even had offices, hired people to be transformation officers. There was a half of activity to say we cannot continue with a white-owned economy the way it is. We got to change it. That has disappeared because they get a sense that there's nobody who's sort of pushing them. Just last 2 weeks ago, the legal profession, right? You got your government to reject a sector code transformation law that would change that sector. I'm just giving you this example. I want you to address that for me, right? How do we get out of this mode where it's like business as usual, given the horrible indicators of high unemployment, huge inequality? We are the most unequal society in the world, and hunger, with half of the population living below the breadline. If you address those to BEE, why do we seem to be sort of hands off a little bit? Sector code is in your area as Justice Minister. Why is it that your cabinet has not approved the sector code on the legal fraternity?
Yeah, indeed, the JJBE should not be negotiable. It should be done. It must be executed. It's in the law, so that it is able to spread and be felt by everyone. It is what the paper is written on.
Yes.
And I think there has been huge movement in the mining sector. Almost in the coal mining, more than 30% is black players and so forth. With the legal sector code, Justice, we have been very clear. We support that it must be promulgated. The legal sector must be transformed.
Yeah.
And
so it's a question of left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, because your colleague or DTI has rubbished the thing, is going to court using our taxpayers' money to fight a law that you are agreeing with? I mean, I cannot understand.
We are engaging with the DTI minister to
Yeah.
process it and to approve the code. And that is the discussion that is happening. And we have given that feedback to the Legal Practice Council that as justice, we fully support it. And we are hopeful that once all the engagements and the processes, because he's engaged in processes, legal opinions and all that, once it's done, he will be able to do it. And we have said that we are hopeful that he should do it before the before the end of the term. We have put
he's
it
got
to
30
him
days.
that it has to be done.
He's got exactly 30
I
days.
believe it will be done. So BE should never be negotiable.
Yeah.
Even in terms of the means of production. I mean, when you look at the stats that Wandile Sihlobo does show in terms of even with the land, there has been about 25% movement in that space. So there's been various laws.
Yeah, but on the land, you guys have failed in Parliament to just pass a law that would implement your own resolution of your own conference.
Yeah,
and that one, I'm not convinced.
Yeah, you will remember that it was because we could not agree with the EFF that we must take the land even of black people. And that's the point I'm raising. Wandile says now 25% of the land is in the hands of black people. So if we just say we nationalize all the land, we're also nationalizing from those that we have redistributed to. We have given them title in terms of ownership of their farms, and also
Why
in terms
you find
of
a way to get together on that
and also
score?
in terms of ownership. Your house, people in Soweto, they were under the custodian of the apartheid government, under the Bantu Administration Act, to lease the land from government. We can't say again to people of Soweto, they must lease from government, when we have now given them a title deeds in Umlazi and across.
That's the only deadlock.
So we engaged with the EFF, and we were open to say this should be a targeted approach, so that we don't retake from those that have already
have the title.
Yes.
Prof, are you convinced with this argument?
Unfortunately, we could not agree. But we still pushed through the legislation in Parliament, and it was rejected by Parliament. But as we speak now, the expropriation bill is in the table of the President for him to sign it to do exactly that, a targeted expropriation and redistribution will still continue.
Prof, are you convinced? I just get a feeling that second-generation rights have taken a sort of a back seat. If you look at access to water, even access to housing. I mean, the human settlement backlog is huge. Yes, the progress has been made, but there's still a huge thing there where it doesn't seem like that's a priority. Second generation are a priority. Your own view, and also weigh in on the land question.
Let me start with I have complete support for BE and its equalization potential. However, you come back to your introduction, the JSE continues to be controlled by those old companies and families, and those who participate in the giddy heights of the economy, the nouveau riche who have benefited from democracy. We actually haven't created a system of wealth spread. It's been a few individuals who get in there, and before you know it, they've sold out their shares, they've cashed in, they've become fat. There's no spread. You know, you can have a castle on a hill, but if it's surrounded by shacks, what's the value of that castle? That I don't think we're addressing. So if you come back to the profession, the legal profession, you know, under democracy, we have, and I'm going to say this myself because I know in my trial there started to be the heavy billing. Right now, I ask lawyers, including senior people in the professions, can you afford yourself? And they all keep quiet because the billing is outrageous. Ordinary people cannot afford access to justice, and our democracy has created a competition commission that's outrageous for enablement of the majority. We live on the southern tip of Africa. We don't live in the US and in Europe. And in fact, if you go to large parts of Europe, you cannot get title deed. You only get your house or the property, not the land. You know, a few years ago when our president was visiting, I think it was this current UK monarch, the Archbishop of Canterbury was down in Robben Island, and he asked me, what is up with the land question? Because next door Mugabe started, and then he went into, you know, the previous prime minister, the British prime minister, and there was a fallout, etc. I asked him, who owns the land in your country? He said the state, and quickly corrected himself and said the crown. You cannot own land in many of these places. How come we grant title deed? Right next door in Namibia, people are challenging, produce your title deed. In this country, people put X's, you know, made chiefs, local people, do all those kinds of things, and through Roman Dutch law, dispossessed ourselves. Let's have a reality check, please. The law needs to be put aside, and we need to look at a compact of sharing the wealth, the land, and the products that come from it, not just for a minority. Please, it can happen if you have the will. I want to just say that democracy has benefited the nomenclatura, but it's also benefited. Whites have never been as wealthy as they are. Yes, you see people standing on street corners, but look at the real wealth. I think there is a huge unearthing potential that we need people in leadership, not merely government, not only in our legislature and so on. I remember the previous Chief Justice raising this in one of his lectures, saying he was outraged when somebody was charging 200,000 or something like that per, you know, I don't even want to go into that. But we've just come out of a commission that cost us over R1 billion.
Yes.
Now, let's have some semblance of reality here. We are spending money in places we don't need to. Justice is not being accessed by ordinary people. And I think, let me give, having said that, let me also point to a success, and that is Robben Island has success for 2 successive years now, and going into the next, we have turned things around, reduced reliance on the state, just doing small things, no big things.
You're not shutting it down. You're not closing Robben Island.
It cannot be. No, it is a national heritage that Madiba's government thankfully proclaimed, and it's become a world heritage.
I wanted to talk,
it's
Prof,
iconic.
Before you get on with the sales pitch of Robben Island, I want us to talk about the importance of places like Robben Island in actually, in a sense, protecting our heritage. Because part of the narrative we're talking about is young kids who were not 10, you were 10, but who were not even born in 1994. And now they don't know what on earth you're talking about. They are confused.
Absolutely.
You're talking about Biko, they're saying what? You know, they Googled, say, let's Google who was this Biko.
They're going to say that about Mandela.
Yeah, can I just link to that before you get to that issue about Robben Island and other similar heritage, you know, protectors, if you like, or promoters, or talk about the issue of justice, Minister. Right? I mean, one of the biggest celebrations that we should have is the Constitution. You say the Constitution is 26 now, 26 years old. Solid Constitution now acknowledged all over the world, right? But in terms of the justice system, do you think there is a blind side or a blind spot in the fact that the justice, the judiciary is actually not administratively independent from you, Minister? In other words, if you want to switch off the tap in Parliament about what they are funded, you can easily do that. So they have to report to you, so to speak. And the Chief Justice spoke about this on the show. Is this something you are looking at to change?
Yeah, there is a discussion, and there is no perfect model anywhere in the world. It's a mixture. There are situations where, in most parts of the world, that aspect is still administered through the executive, and is solely for the benefit also of all South Africans. And it will never happen that we switch off any tap, because when you look, all departments' money, they go through a particular department. So you will have a situation where the Minister of Justice will have to do it obviously is done for the judiciary and so forth. It's not for
so
me.
there is
And
a conversation.
Yes, there
it's just
is.
that it's been shelved because
There
the
is.
Chief Justice says
There
the
is.
judiciary gave you a document long ago.
Yes, yes, and there is a conversation that is happening, even within the executive, as to how do we find
But you'll sort it out after the election.
a balance. It is happening as we are speaking. There is that discussion.
Are you happy with
But the finding of the balance, JJ, it also
Yeah.
goes to look into the other examples across the globe. There is no part of the world where you find the Chief Justice going to Parliament to account for this money,
Directly. They
to
account through the
get the
minister.
budget and all. So it's a complex balance that we have to find, but still giving them their independence.
Talking about the justice system quickly before we go to a break, one of the things that are a blot on the new South African story, the flag and the rainbow, is the criminality that is affecting our communities. I mean, if you look at the statistics, you'll think, are we at war here? 80 people dying every day, etc. And then you got an NPA, right, that I'm sure has many cases. I mean, Batoi on radio this morning was saying they've got some, I mean, made a big number, 400 and some thousand cases.
Yeah.
But on a perception basis, because remember, justice must be seen to be done, right? Is it an unreasonable thing to expect that a big fish, man, just one big fish of one of these people who the Auditor General mentions every year that they are wasting money, billions, could be in prison? Is that an unreasonable expectation from South Africans of the NPA?
It's not an unreasonable expectation, and that's why we have provided the support for the NPA. As you are aware, we also have the NPA Amendment Bill that is further aimed to give more independency to the Investigative Directorate, Permanency and Security, and also resources. And I do believe that the foundation has been laid. They will be able to do that part that you are looking for. With regards to violent crime,
5 years since the new NDBP, but we don't see any dramatic movement at the top. And I'm not talking about, people shoplifting, so small things here. I'm talking about people who are stealing billions, according to reports that are formal, because the HG's report is not a rumor. I hear that the NPA is saying, the Zondo report is a bunch of gossip, which is nonsense, because we spent 4 years listening to horror stories. On the basis of those stories alone, even without the report, the NPA should have chased some of those people. Just set one or two examples and just arrest somebody. Why is it that you guys are not calling for that kind of blood?
Yeah, but remember, JJ, there are people who were arrested while the commission was still ongoing. And even the
But are they convicted?
The Nolane case, as you are saying, they must just arrest. It ended up with the matter being dismissed in court. So there must be proper due investigations in a constitutional democracy where the standard of proof is beyond reasonable doubt.
How much will you give the NPA out of 100? If you're a teacher and this student has been there for 5 years, out of 100 you'll give what?
I will give them 60 because you will remember that the ID was promulgated in 2019. And from that time, they started to employ people and all. It took,
her term of office even ending before she could do anything. Prof. Cooper, are you convinced about...
Let me finish, JJ.
The extent... Wait, don't finish.
It takes time to build an institution. And they are at a point where I believe they will be able to...
So they could set a break for 5 years because you are busy building an institution. Prof. Cooper, quickly before you go to a break, how much will you mark this student of Batoi for 5 years of... basically not arresting a single big fish?
Now, I think that it's beginning to happen a little bit too late, unfortunately. I think that we need to... No, seriously, I think we need to understand that our democracy has made certain... I talked about who's become rich. They are able to hire the best legal brains to defeat our system. So don't ignore that side of it. The crooks... Banemali, they've got the chelet, they're going to do it, and they're going to do it very well, and people are going to be defended, and when they get thrown out of court, we're going to blame
all right, Prof.
the system.
We need to take a break.
I think we need another way to look at how we prosecute these cases. I think that there's an agreement that the legal profession needs to come to the party so that they can assist. If we don't do that, we're going to continue down a slippery slide, which we cannot afford.
I've got to take a break. Then after the break, we're going to round off the conversation and talk about how do we secure the heritage and free the mind? Because all these things, part of it is because of the mind is in chains. How do we unshackle that? Robben Island Museum, there's Apartheid Museum here. Are those things effective, or they are not, doing what they are supposed to do for our democracy? Let's take a break. It's Part of Truth. We're running off that conversation about reflections on 30 years of democracy. On Saturday, South Africa reaching a big milestone, 30 years since we could all exercise our democratic right to vote. The question is, the heritage of it all, right? If you look at, for example, our education system, right? Park the fact that our kids at grade 4 cannot read or write for meaning or whatever. Let's park that. Just the decolonization of the education system. Things like that. Do we have institutions that can begin to look at freedom from that perspective, freedom of the mind? Because once we free the mind, all the other things will automatically be solved in the next generation.
Yeah, I think Basic Education have announced that they're in that process of reshaping the curriculum to speak to the issues that you are raising. And I believe the institution like the Robben Island Museum, Freedom Park, and many other institutions that are playing a role to keep that heritage will also make a very good, meaningful contribution to the reshaping of that. And I also know that even in higher education, that conversation is there. They are beginning to orientate the education system, even in the higher education, in that form of a decolonized mind.
And are you happy? I mean, I know it's not a portfolio, but are you happy that these have been taken care of? Because some of them are in disuse, man. I mean, if you go to that Mandela Museum in the Free State, it's like, just a backyard of something that doesn't matter. Do you have a sense that there is a prioritization of upkeep of this? Robben Island, he's going to tell us now. But my understanding is that they were going through a hell of a financial meltdown. And it's an iconic sort of institution that you can't allow it to go into disuse.
The other sad part in our country, I mean, when you look at Robben Island and you look at Self-Coup, is that we found the correct and the right person to run the institution.
I see.
Some of these institutions, you'll find there's a department in the Department of, there's a budget in arts and culture to run, to help. But when you go there, because we did not find the right people. So there are institutions that are a beacon of hope, like the Robben Island, Freedom Park, and there are others across the country. Heritage sites, well run. But there are others indeed where you get shocked that where is the budget going to? Yes.
Prof, there's your chance now. Tell us about Robben Island, because a lot of people were thinking it's on the verge of collapse. That's incorrect, Prof?
Absolutely not. It's risen through COVID, and we have, I'm pleased to say, that successively in the last couple of years, South Africans have been the leading visitors to Robben Island.
Wow.
South African visitors who pay what they paid pre-COVID, that amount hasn't changed. They're being subsidized. An adult is being subsidized by foreign visitors. South Africans are coming. The last audit, which is underway now, will tell us that there are over 247,000 visitors led by South Africans. We also are opening up free for all our children and children of the world. If you are under 12, you can come to this heritage site free. There are certain conditions, because you have to go by boat, etc., because you have to put a life jacket and so on. But we're opening up these spaces. People are using it. We also have reached out to traditional groups out there that are part of the landscape pre-apartheid. The colonial advent and before. Robben Island was visited by the Phoenicians before the current era, JJ. And there are artifacts there that are immeasurable in meaning. And that's why we need to protect it. But say to a person who is hungry, protect this. And you throw a heritage site out of nowhere, however well-intended it is, it's not going to mean anything.
Absolutely.
However, if you look at some of the places, they are being protected. Just over 2 weeks ago, I'm sad to say that it was in the news where Biko's tomb was raided. There were those clenched fists, breaking the fists, and the community rallied, found those bronze fists. If
My
you
goodness.
did not have community involvement, you can't create heritage sites nowhere without buy-in from the community. Let the community protect that space. Let the community benefit from that heritage.
Yes.
Let there be local entrepreneurship for people out there so that they, one, with heritage, they understand that history. Otherwise, you're going to get people saying, and we're going to go into June 16th in about 6 or 7 weeks' time, people are going to again say, what is June 16th? They forget, because we allow them to forget. Our democracy trashes our history. The liberation history is paramount. It needs to be protected. But the colonial advent and the fighters against colonization, against Dutch, against British, and against other colonization need to be protected.
We're going to have to leave it there, Prof.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Prof, for your time and those words of wisdom. You need to come to the studios for a longer conversation. We still need to talk to you about lots of things. Minister, you're parting short. 30 years of democracy. What do you say to the country?
I say
tonight?
that let's go and vote on the 29th of May to continue with the transformatory journey with the current government.
Okay, Minister, thank you so much for always making time for us. All the best with your remaining campaign, 30 days to go. You're confident you'll come back?
I'm very confident. The response from the people of South Africa has been amazing. Although they raise questions and issues and
but you're also
concerns,
happy to be on the opposition bench if needs be.
They raise them from a point of love, so they will definitely vote.
You're happy
ANC.
to be on the opposition bench if needs be.
Yeah, I believe they will vote for the ANC, but if it comes to that, yes, we are ready to continue with the struggle, even if it's in Parliament.
Thank you so much. Prof, thank you for your time. We'll visit you at Robben Island and maybe we'll do a show from there of these days.
Please do.
Yeah, all right. Minister, thank you once again.
Thank you.
That was our reflections on 30 years of democracy following that big milestone South Africa reached on Saturday. We want to say happy birthday to South Africa.